Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Just giving it another minute to see who else will be joining us. Hope everyone's having a great Tuesday. And thank you so much for being here. We're just going to give it another 30 seconds. All righty, let us just simply dive in, and I'm going to make sure to pull up my information for all of you. Okie dokie, we're going to get started. So, hello, FishBowl. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Rachel Serwetz. I'm the founder and CEO and career coach at WOKEN, and we are excited to be back on FishBowl. We're here every few weeks with some hopefully good talks that are, helpful for your careers. Please feel free to click my profile to be notified of future events. And we are here with another chat as part of our Navigating the Workplace series. So all these different chats are focused on different topics. Today is going to be about, boundary setting, work-life balance, any and all kind of guardrails, boundaries that you kind of need to set for yourself, just to help you strategically navigate your career and your time, and just simply prioritize yourself when there's so many asks being made of you. And we're going to just dive in. We've got some planned Q&A, and we'll see how long that takes. Not really sure, but please feel free to ask any Q&A. You can do that throughout, either by raising your hand to join the stage, or you can DM me and I will monitor that if you don't want to come up to the stage. But please feel free to ask questions at any time. We've got some prepared Q&A, but for today's talk, please feel free to just, come up and let us know what would be helpful. Before I dive in, I'll just quickly introduce myself if we have not already met. Again, my name is Rachel. My background, I started out in financial services. I worked at Goldman Sachs and then Bridgewater. I worked in operations as well as recruiting and performance management. From there, I did a little HR research at Aon Hewitt. I also did a tech MBA at NYU Stern, and I was trained as a coach and certified through the ICF. And I've done career coaching through a variety of organizations, including building my own company for over 6.5 years. We provide career coaching for all kinds of professionals with all kinds of career goals. So a really wide array of seeing so many situations out there and helping people who are either transitioning to their next step or just simply navigating their job. So that's the super quick intro on me. Happy to dive into any of that if you want to review it. Okay. So the first question is, how do I address work-life balance with my manager? They've never asked about it before. So this is an interesting question, right? I would say managers may or may not bring up the words work-life balance. If it's a great manager, they probably will. But it really depends. If work-life balance is going great. It doesn't need to be a conversation. If you are overworking, only a very special, good manager. I mean, every manager should do this, but is it common? No. They should recognize if you are overworked, and they should, of course, think about that and want to be aware of that and want to talk to you about that, right? So a good manager doesn't want you to be burnt out, but sometimes it feels like there's no choice. There's too much work going on the team and too little people. And so if you're not sure how to bring it up, I think there's different ways to approach it. You may or may not have to use the words work-life balance per se, but you really want to think about coming to a one-on-one meeting. Well, first and foremost, I would say just have one-on-one meetings with your manager set up. It could be weekly, it could be bi-weekly, at least once a month with your manager one-on-one, because that's a great place to start, is just have the regular cadence. From there, you might want to just say, I feel like I have a lot going on my plate. Can you help me prioritize this, right? Because every team and every manager is different. If you get on the same page of the priorities and something is agreed upon that it's sort of your last priority and you don't get to it, what you're doing in that prioritization conversation is essentially getting the okay from your manager that if there's a 10th priority on your list and you don't get to it, they've sort of you've agreed, to what is on your plate and those order of priorities. And so you're trying to share in the conversation, show them your to-do list, show them your priority list or project list, make it a shared document so it's very easy for them to see what it is you have going on. And then if you think there's something that's at risk of not getting done after you do that prioritization, then you can bring that up and be like, I have all these different things. The last thing on the list is this. Are you okay if that gets done, sometime in the span of this month, or what is the timeline that you're thinking? So when I think about work-life balance, I think about capacity, I think about prioritization. Of course, we think about time management, but if you're thinking about having a conversation around it, I think it's a question of sort of being able to create boundaries without just saying, I need to log off at 5. Of course, you can do that if you need to and you have an appointment. But I think as long as you make those priorities clear, you get in sync on the deadlines and you get in sync on the priorities, then they're aware that the last thing on your list just may not get done, right? Because you are human in the end of the day and there's only so much you're going to be able to do. So that's just some 2 cents on that. I'm sure we could dig a lot deeper, but that might be a good way to start talking about it. And again, that shared documentation is just such a great way to literally get on the same page. The next question says, I have unhealthy boundaries with work, replying to emails on weekends, working through PTO. How can I right the ship after being like this for so long? So this is really interesting. I think, again, every team and every manager is different. Sometimes there's a culture where that is expected, in which case it makes it really hard to do it if everybody else is doing that. Now, even if everybody else is doing that, I still think it's worthwhile for you to chat with your manager and start talking about, all right, I have this PTO. I have this project going on. I've created a handoff document. I'm giving the project to, Tiffany, and I'm going to be able to have a backup on the team when I'm not here. Here's all the steps. Here's all the resources you're going to need. Here's the support, that I've already met with the team and they know exactly what to do, FYI, right? Creating a handoff plan and making it easy for people to support you. If your team doesn't operate that way, can you build that culture? Because guess what? When someone else goes out, they're going to want to tap you for support and vice versa. So can you start that culture initiative on your team so that it becomes more normal? Now, if your team doesn't operate like that and it's just you operating that way, it really becomes this self-discipline kind of game. You might even, I've heard of people just literally deleting the email app from their phone altogether, or the Slack app. And of course you can silence notifications. And so not bringing your laptop on vacation or deleting the apps from your phone is kind of probably one of the best hacks. But I think you're going to make yourself feel more comfortable to do it if you have a conversation before you leave for that PTO. In terms of the weekends, again, I think it could be more, again, just self-choice, self-discipline around it. Or look, I would say if you're going to want to reply to an email on a weekend, at the very least, make your life a little easier. And maybe you find 20, 30 minutes, to do it in a very focused way versus replying to emails nonstop all day, Saturday and Sunday, right? Because that's just not fair to you. You don't need that. You don't deserve that. And truthfully, most companies don't actually even need you to do that. And so there's a big difference between replying to something the minute it comes in versus, okay, I know that every Saturday, at 9:30 or every Sunday at 4:30, I'm just going to take 30 minutes and catch up. And I'm going to do what I can to get organized for the week. That doesn't hurt. But figure out your boundaries of what is doable for you. And I think truncating it into a period of time can help make it seem a little bit more manageable and focused, and then you go about the rest of your day. But it does take discipline, and I'll say as an entrepreneur, I've had to really get very used to this because things happen constantly. I mean, it's the same whether you're an entrepreneur or not. And so it takes practice of just being willing to leave something unread and just know that you're probably going to better answer that rather than on your phone. You're going to better answer that when you go sit down at your desk, at your computer, and you can be thoughtful in your response, right? And you're going to be able to better handle those tasks when you're in the right zone. If something is urgent, that's a different story. But I think getting in the habit of having your team even mention to you what is urgent, what is not, or just thinking about that really before you just jump to reply to something, is this urgent, and does this person actually need a response in the next 24 hours or not? So having systems like Some people label emails of what's urgent. Some people organize emails into folders. Some people leave things as unread. There's any number of systems, but I think thinking about your process for how you will easily flag something in a way that you're going to be able to come back to it, and then making time. So on a Monday, block your calendar from 9 to 11, and you're going to catch up on everything that happened from the weekend. So giving yourself the time to catch up from what you need to catch up. So just creating the space for you to build, systems and build time and build comfort with, how can I sort of time block this? How can I attack this in a different way? How can I chunk this so that I'm not like constantly on call, but rather I sort of group it into moments that feels, I can just think about it during this moment. And then separately, I can enjoy my day, right? You don't have to be on call 24/7. The next question shows, do you think remote work makes work-life balance easier or more difficult? That's a great question. I think I would say like the gut obvious answer is that it probably makes things more difficult, but I could very well see an in-person job similarly having like after hours needs. So I think it really depends on your role and your team and the company culture and the nature of the work. And, are you a team of one and there's SLAs where you have to get back to somebody tomorrow? Or do you have a team of 10 and everybody can help each other and deliverables are due in a week, right? You got to look at the timeliness of things. And, it's interesting because even when you're in an interview, if you want to ask about work-life balance, I don't love to just say like, what's your work-life balance? I like to say, how do you assign things to people? Like, what are the SLAs? What are the turnaround times? What are the backups? If somebody's out, how does somebody else, step in? There's other ways to assess and think about work-life balance. Like, what enables work-life balance? And actually think about that rather than, just quote unquote, the concept work-life balance versus what can I actually do to make this better, make this easier, give myself a support system. Or, if you think there's genuinely too much on your plate, that becomes a conversation with your manager. You are human and it's okay to show them there's a lot going on right now. And it's not to say you can't handle it or you can't do all of it. It's just you're human and, you want to be able to show up to your projects well versus having too much and slipping on all of them, right? So it's okay to reprioritize your plate with your manager. And also I think getting in a better habit, honestly, of just prioritization of your projects on an ongoing basis, but also like think about every Monday. Like what are your top 5 to 7 things that have to get done that week? Sending something like that to your team or to your manager is a great way of saying, here's what I'm accountable for this week. Here's the order of those priorities. And that way you're setting up your own expectations and you're actually owning the story of, here's what I'm going to set out to do this week, like just so everyone knows, right? And then all of a sudden, it's not a question of what the plan is or what I should be expecting of you and why didn't you get this done? Okay, guess what? Here's my process for always letting you know, what it is I'm going to plan to do for this week, right? So getting in rhythms like that. The next question shows, how can I identify companies with good work-life balance during the job search interview process? Okay, so I jumped the gun on that one a little bit. I think during an interview, asking those types of questions, what are your turnaround times for projects? What are your SLAs with clients? How many people on the team get staffed to these certain projects? You could say, what is the pace of the work? You could say, what are the typical hours of the team? You could say, are there certain projects that are typically urgent or, longer term projects? What is the, variety of the pace of the, deliverables that this team has? I think there's different phrases to use. You can even just say, like how are different things assigned across the team? How is there a backup system? Is there an account owner and a secondary account owner? Things like that. So you want to actually ask yourself, given what you know about the work, what are the questions I can ask about how this typically works to know that there's support in place, right? So get really specific with it. In terms of like identifying companies, that's a really good question. I would say it's a lot easier when you're in a conversation, in an interview, or even in a networking call to figure out like, are these companies in line, or do they have balance? But when you're just simply doing the research, it's kind of hard to know because anyone could say they have balance and like they don't. So as much as I could tell you, like, read their website or read the job postings or whatever, like, honestly, the best things would be networking with people there or asking during the interview process. There might be other things I can try to think about that are more like creative hacks per se. But that's kind of my best thought at this moment. The next question says, how do I get over guilt when I enforce boundaries at work, fully unplugging during PTO? Sometimes I feel bad about it. Oh my goodness. I always say never like compromise for the sake of a company. I mean, first of all, we're in this swath of layoffs. Do you think that I don't want to say they don't care. I'm sorry. That's very, very, very direct. But like, you should take your PTO. Bottom line. I always say never, ever, ever let a company get in the way of your health. And your PTO is your PTO. Like, the guilt just needs to kind of wash away. And maybe that's not the best, most strategic solution. I think it takes practice. I think you have to put in habits to like delete the apps off your phone and things like that. I think you want to put in habits to have those conversations and set up the handoffs before you go on PTO. But I think the emotions around it would take practice and talking with a coach or talking with a therapist or talking with a mentor, talking with a peer and figuring out, why do you feel guilty? Like, what do you owe them? What do they owe you? Like, they're paying you. This is absolutely a fair time that you deserve to take off, right? If something is really urgent, you can leave with your handoff plan and say, if there's an issue with this client or if there's an issue with this, call my cell phone, but like, here are the only times you should call me, right? Otherwise, email me, right? Like, in your handoff plan, you are making it clear what everybody should do. You are going to hyperlink all the key resources they're going to need. You are going to let your clients know that you're going out and here's your backup and here's your out of office that has the right information, out of office message, right? So you need to set yourself up for success. But if there's something deeper, I would just drill into that to try to understand yourself. You might have been, sometimes these things come from our upbringing. Like, we might have been made to feel that we constantly have to work or something. And so we need to like unlearn that, feeling. But you absolutely deserve to just fully take that time off. If there's truly something urgent, maybe you check in once on your vacation. But again, time block it. If it's an hour and you focus and you only zoom in on what is most important, then guess what? They will still acknowledge that you went above and beyond to be nice, to check in even when you didn't have to, but just time block it so it's not taking over your mind the entire time you're there. And to be honest, this just takes practice. Like, I guess I've gotten pretty good at this, which is odd because as a startup, like, you can always be doing more. I'm literally my own boss. I literally rely on the income that I drive. My actions drive the income for my business, which I fully rely on. If something is more stressful than that, please tell me. But again, it takes practice to say, look, I would rather have this time off so that when I come back, I'm actually better at my job. I'm actually more refreshed. What is the point of taking the PTO otherwise? So take that practice, get good at it, put specific tips and, processes in place to set yourself up for success. I think you're going to feel more comfortable when you have the conversations, when you have the handoff plan, and just really practice it and get the others around you to help you practice. If you voice that that's a goal, whoever you're traveling with is going to want to help you with it. But I think dig deeper. Why do you feel guilty in the first place? That's probably what I would say there. Next question says, how do I speak up about my work-life balance being bad without sounding whiny? So I think we've touched on this a little bit. Again, you don't need to like complain and just say, I'm working too much. You can say, here's everything on my plate right now, and show that, literally on a piece of paper, and say, it feels like there's a lot going on. Can we just get in sync on the priorities? I think that's a really nice sounding way to show them that there's a lot going on and you want to make sure you're doing the most important things. And again, I think it implies that if you get their agreement on your priorities, that if something's last on the list, they then know. It is a manager's job, somebody above you, to know what your plate is and what your priorities are. And if something's at the bottom of your list, then it's not your fault if you don't get to it, right? Now, if somebody's making it your fault, there are times when a company or a manager will make it impossible. Like they will make you say you have too many things on your plate. It is difficult to get done or impossible to get done within 9 to 5. And yet they still say, where's that thing? Then that's just a culture that you might want to exit, honestly. Like you want to put everything in place to do what you can to massage the environment, like to just manipulate it in like a way that works for you. But if there's things that are out of your control after you've tried everything, then that might just be more ingrained with the culture or with that manager, right? So just remember you're putting in good work habits in general, right? On a Monday, sending your priorities or sharing your prioritization document with your manager more broadly, having these conversations. That to me at a bare minimum is you being transparent and say there's something last on your list. If that manager wants that thing to get done and you can't get to it, guess what? It has to go to someone else. There's only so much time. You're a human. So just have these conversations. And again, you don't have to say, I'm working too much. There's different ways to get your point across. Well, the next question says, what are the top 3 most important boundaries to set at work to set your work-life balance up for success? It's a good question. I mean, I think the obvious thing people think about with work-life balance is like your time, right? Like when do you log off? When do you log on? But I think it also is a matter of like, when are you expected to deliver things, right? Like what is the actual deadline for certain projects? And I think getting in sync on that, getting in agreement on that. For all you know, you're like thinking it's due tomorrow when you could ask and maybe it would be fine to send it in Thursday. So really getting in sync with any of your stakeholders. A lot of us work cross-functionally. So maybe there's another team. Another thing you could do is like, if you have a cross-functional stakeholder, understand from them, or even a client, you could say, what is on the back of this deliverable? Like, what is this dependent, what do you have that's dependent on getting this? I want to understand the risk and the impact and the timeline and the urgency so that I can manage against that, right? So don't just have somebody give you a deadline. Understand their deadline so that you can actually prioritize effectively. So I think, boundaries is your time, and that means when you log in, when you log out. I think other boundaries is just like deadlines, right? What's expected of you by when, and really actually owning that so that the deadline makes sense to you. And I think just communication, like how often are you expected to check messages? Every role and company culture and even team operates differently with like how often they're in communicado with each other. But if you feel like you're being expected to answer constantly, that might be something where you can have a conversation with your colleagues or your manager and say, just so you know, I'm not ignoring your message. Maybe you have a process and you could say, I check my emails twice a day, or I check Slack twice a day in the morning and the afternoon. So just so you know, I'm going to get to everything. I'm not ignoring you. If it's urgent, text me at this number or whatever, right? And I think instead of like the top 3 boundaries, I would really just ask yourself, what do you think the top 3 boundaries are for you? And figuring out what you need. A lot of people talk about flexibility, the ability to go to a doctor's appointment or whatever, right? Like that's a different boundary of like, if I need to do this, if I need to pick up my kids, I'm allowed to do that, right? And so I think each person should set their own, like, what is most important to me, and then make sure they can get that. The next question says, we have so many recent trends like quiet quitting or quiet vacationing. What does this mean for the future of work and our work-life balance? It's a really good question. I think with quiet quitting, a lot of teams or managers have become, I guess, more unsure and more, maybe let's call it overbearing of not knowing what the other person is doing in a remote environment. So I think what's really important is also just the transparency and sending updates. If you are working remotely, how often are you sending periodic progress updates to your team, your manager, or whoever needs to know what it is you're up to? If you're remote, you want to make sure that they're not guessing what you're doing, or they're not guessing if you're working. Like if you are quiet quitting, I guess the risk here is because people have done it, for those who are working hard, are they going to be acknowledged in the same way, right? So what does transparency look like when you're working remotely? And so I don't know if it's going to affect work-life balance as long as you put in these boundaries in place, but I would say the impact is it may make managers more into the micromanagement of things. And so put tools in place, project management tools or documentation around your project status updates, anything like that, where you are helping yourself to create transparency for others so that people don't have to guess what it is you're up to. That to me would probably be the most important protection of yourself. No one's going to question you if they know how much progress you're making. If you're in sync on what are your to-dos for the week, what are your goals for the week, where do you stand, are there issues, are there blockers? Send a synthesized update. It goes a very long way so that others just know you're on top of it and they're just going to question you less. Next question reads, what should you do if your manager simply doesn't care about your work-life balance? I've tried to have multiple conversations, but they haven't worked. Well, if you're listening today, I would say try any of the tips that I just mentioned if you haven't already tried them, and do everything you possibly can, even if it's influencing the team. Like maybe there's different initiatives you could put in place so that the team has a backup where they never had that process before. Maybe they never had a backup on an account or something like that, right? So you want to try everything you can to ensure that your team can support each other, including you, and that you're creating this culture of support. And if you've tried everything, reprioritizing, transparency, letting them know your plate is full, things like that, if you hit a wall and you've really tried everything, it just simply might be ingrained either in that manager or in that culture, unfortunately. And so I think certain teams just simply operate in different ways, right? Like I've got a remote team, fractional contractors, maybe 5 to 10 people at any given time. We're on Slack. And I usually say, all right, let's all work between the hours of like 9 to 5. And that way we are online at the same time. But each person has a different set of hours in any given week. So as long as they're online within those set of hours, and as long as I'm seeing updates in our Trello, like I know what's going on. And so with your manager, I think you always want to ask, what is it like you need to see from me? What is your preference for how and when I can give you the right updates so you have the right information from me? How often do you want to see those updates? Where do you want to see those updates? Where can we best stay in sync if you're not already in sync? So just leveraging tools and processes to figure out like what is the rhythm that works for you and your manager and your team. And that way there's just simply not as much confusion, not as much friction, not as much guessing. So leverage tools to your advantage. Any shared documentation is key, right? Project management tools, like either you're using it or you're not, right? And sometimes they're too complex or cumbersome, but if they're simple enough, you're seeing who's doing what and where does it stand right now, right? And you can maybe comment if you need somebody's help or if you have a blocker, right? Trello is, to me, very, very simple in the best way. You could even have a Google Sheet or a Google Doc to list out, here's what I'm up to. So a simple, effective, shared documentation, I think transparency and prioritization goes a very long way. But yeah, if you're hitting a wall, it just simply might not be the right environment for you. Any thoughts, questions from the audience? Please do raise your hand. Let me know what I can help with. I am checking my DMs just to make sure if we see anything here. Please let me know if there's anything I've missed. And if you have any other questions, just career-wise in general, please feel free to ask me anything. But that's kind of our prepared list for today. But please do raise your hand, send me a DM if there's anything you're struggling with, any challenges that I can help with. I'll give it another minute or two. Please feel free. I am happy to help with any topic, even if it's outside of boundary setting. Please do let me know. And if we wrap early, please do know that you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. And my website is iamwoken.com. We always offer a free call. So even if you're transitioning to a new role, you're navigating your role, whatever you're working on career-wise, we are here to help. And we will be back for more on FishBowl, but please do, I'll stick around. If anyone has a question, please raise your hand. If not, we will see you soon. I know this was shorter than planned, but I hope you got some good takeaways, some good tips, and some good hacks on how to think about, boundaries and balance at work. And if anyone has questions, please do let me know. And I Hold on. There we go.
Sorry, I don't know
Sorry.
what happened, but
Um,
I think we might have cut you off. Maybe you wanna restate what you were saying.
oh goodness. Okay, no problem. Yeah. So I'm seeing a question in the DMs that says how to find your best fit during the interview process. So for those who please do expand if there's a you want to clarify what you mean there, but we have a whole process, what I call career exploration. So if you are trying to figure out your best fit role or best fit industry or best fit work environment, there's a lot that I could say about exploration, but I would say in a nutshell, you want to spend the time and space to really get to know yourself and your strengths and which role titles are a best fit. You want to think about the industries where you best align, and you want to think about like the size and the stage and the type of company that you best thrive in. Doing some reflection, doing some research, and doing some networking calls is a great way of trying to understand what are the paths that are out there and which one is the best fit for me. You'd have to run those calls in a very creative way to ask the right questions. Okay, so I'm seeing, thank you for expanding. You mentioned the work environment, you're not sure of industry. So, in terms of industry, you want to ask yourself what are sort of those topic areas or problem areas that you find really important or interesting? So, there's of course all kinds of industry sectors in the world, and you want to think about what mission really is something that you can get behind. If you're trying to job search quickly, you might look for industries you already have experience in. But I do think that the key with speed of a job search is actually keeping the same role. Sometimes varying industries is okay to do. So with industry, yeah, you just want to think about who are we serving? What are we helping with? What is this company doing? How and why is it, doing this thing? What is the product or service? And is that an area of innovation, an area of impact that I believe in, right? That's how you think about industry. In terms of work environment, I would just simply think about like the culture. I would think about the size and the stage of the company. I would think about the pace, whether you want, hybrid, remote, or in person. And I would think about all the intangibles, the culture. What are the people like, the values, the personality of the organization? And what does it really feel like? What does it look and feel like? There's role, there's industry, there's environment. Each of those three buckets is where I would try to find clarity in each of those. So this was just sort of a very quick way to think about it. Okay, so I see another question that says, how to make sure you would not end up in a toxic environment? That is a great question. This is not always easy. Of course, there are definitely a lot of things you can ask and look for, but unfortunately, I've heard of some stories where an interview like might seem well and good and great, and then all of a sudden you get there and like there's a lot of issues. And so sometimes we can't avoid it. But of course, you want to ask as much as you possibly can. In the interview process, I would say if you can network with somebody that works either like on that team or in that department or in that company who's outside of your interview process, that would be a great way to make sure that you are getting an objective, honest take about how that company really operates. Even in an interview process, like say you get to the end and you have an offer and there's somebody on the team you haven't spoken to, you can ask for another call, or you can just simply ask for another call with the hiring manager or the recruiter, just getting all of your questions answered, being very comprehensive, but also being very concrete and creative with what you ask and how you ask it. So for example, you might not just say, what's the culture? You might say, tell me about a time someone on the team had a new idea or a suggestion of how to, approach a process, and how did that go? Because either they're going to show you, yeah, like, our ideas go into the backlog and once a year we review it, or they may say, yeah, Kevin, suggested this yesterday and now he's running with it. And, that shows that they're really fast moving and they support people's ideas, right? So when you say, tell me about a time, or you really get stories, you would let them illuminate like by sort of the show versus tell, and then you can figure out what kind of culture is that. So figuring out like what are those priorities and how do you ask for stories or facts and data so that you can sort of opine on what you think that means for you. And I would just say in today's day and age, just keeping your options open. So when you get a new job, you don't have to update your LinkedIn right away. Give it 30 days and, you might keep some other interviews going on in the backlog. Like, truthfully, it is hard to know during an interview process. So if you kind of just want to make yourself feel safe, you might keep options open on the side, right? That's kind of my quick thoughts for that. Any other thoughts or questions, please feel free to raise your hand or DM me. Happy to answer any question. I know we sort of came in here to talk about boundaries and work-life balance, but any career question, I'd be very happy to help and sort of treat this like an AMA. So whatever you are facing, any sort of challenge, please do let me know how I can help. And I'll be looking out for the DMs, but please do raise your hand. And I know if you just joined this late, we'll make sure to get you that recording. And Valentina, you can remind me where people can find that, just to make sure they can catch up on the topic of, what we were chatting earlier on the boundaries. So for anyone else, if you have any questions, please do let us know.
Yeah, of course. And if you missed the conversation, when as soon as we finish this live, you can actually go back to your attended events and you can listen to the full recording that way.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. Have any questions? Anything else I can help with career-wise? Challenges, thoughts, struggles. Hopefully everyone's career is going swimmingly, but if not, I'm happy to help in an open-ended way today with whatever it is you're facing. So please feel free to raise your hand or DM me, and I'll hang out, for the next few minutes just to see if any questions pop up. Okay, so I see a question: how to do career planning. Let me know if you can expand on that. That could mean a lot of things, right? You could be talking about sort of how to think about your career path and where you're headed, or how to think about a promotion. But if I had to guess, it sounds like you're trying to figure out your direction. But let me know if you want to clarify your question in the DM so I know how to answer properly. And, okay, so I see yes. All right, so, hold on, sorry. Want to make sure I'm still here. Okay. Career planning, right? So I usually think about, again, a career exploration process. So what this means is self-reflecting really deeply on what are you like, what are you best at, what are you most interested in, really doing deep self-reflection, and not even thinking about the roles or anything like that. Just thinking about you, what you want to work on, what you're excited to work on, what you're great at, what you want to get more involved with, what sort of topics are interesting to you, things like that. And then you start to translate that into, okay, what options might that mean for me? Are there certain roles or certain industries that actually, might be relevant options where I could go do that work? And then you want to figure out, okay, are any of these options new to me that I want to learn about? So let me do some research. Let me do some networking, right? Meet with the people who are in the roles that you are considering, or in the teams or in the companies or in the industries that you are considering. When you run that call really well, you're going to be able to gather a ton of information. And that's really what's going to help you reflect on, okay, is that the direction I want to go in? So really any sort of doubt, any concern, any open gap, any question, any hesitation, you're going to use these networking calls as honest, informational sort of mentor moments where you're really going to turn any of your open doubts into a question and then use that time to gather information. And by hearing how other people have experienced those things, it's going to actually illuminate how you feel, right? You're going to learn about roles where you're like, oh, I thought I would like that, and actually I really don't. Or, that sounds interesting. Or, oh, I never even heard of that role before. So the networking process is this deep learning, research, and reflection. And you sort of do that iteratively, right? You compare and you're contrasting the options. And that's really when you eventually will get to the point of saying, okay, this is the path that makes sense for me. So you want to keep going through that, until you feel fully clear. If you're thinking about more of a promotion of like, how do I get to this role in 10 years? That would be more around like having mentors, because that's kind of more about like, how do I get a promotion? How do I advance? And there's a lot I could say about promotions, but the key is having regular conversations with your manager, at least like once a month, around what do you need to see from me to reach the next level? because it's their decision really when you get promoted. So have those goals, set them in writing, and then you want to have like monthly conversations about how am I doing against these goals, and have your manager say out loud how you're doing and what it is you need to be doing better and differently to reach the next level. And you keep doing that year over year. That's what's going to make sure you're on track with promotions. Having it be explicit, direct, frequent, proactive conversations. And yeah, just doing that regularly, literally every month, every year. I mean, that's how you're going to make sure you're constantly on track to grow to the next level. That's kind of the quickest way I could say it. But having mentors helps too, because sometimes in a firm, you need to have like champions or sponsors or other people that can really speak on your behalf. Yeah, if you are looking for sponsors, I would just try to pick one or two mentors and really just ask them, like, would you be willing to, be a mentor to me? I would be interested to meet, and then you tell them how often. Maybe it's once a quarter, or it could be once every 6 to 8 weeks. I mean, you could set up whatever cadence feels good, and then always have an agenda and just let them know, like, here's what I would want to work on with you. I'd love to learn from you. Would you be willing to do this for the next 6 to 12 months? Something like that. And just put some structure around it, because then they know that you're taking it seriously and you're going to use their time wisely. That's kind of what I would do with mentors. I see another question. What would you say to someone with 1 to 2 years experience and work history wanting a promotion too soon? That's a great question. Well, look, if you're the manager and you think that this junior person is asking you for the promotion and you think it's too soon, then it would be on you to sort of set expectations of like, here's the next level. Typically in our company, people reach that level in X amount of time. Here are the typical like experiences or achievements or projects or, skills that I would want to see from you to be able to reach that level. And we can track it. And here's the timeline. So you don't want to like be vague and just let them know, like, no, you want to try to give like some hope so that they have some level of motivation and direction, because you do want your team members to feel like there's the possibility of growth. If it's a really long timeline, they might be, a little demotivated. So I would just try to set expectations around, even if they can't get that promotion in 2 years, what could happen in a year's time, and get really specific with the goals. Like, what are the stretch goals? What are the stretch projects that they can take on so that you show you're still invested in their growth to reach the next level, even if it's like not a new title, but it's getting them on their journey to get there, right? Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Any other questions? Please do feel free to raise your hand or DM me. I've sort of turned this into an AMA. Anyone who joined late, the recording will have 30 minutes of tips all about, the boundary setting and the work-life balance. So I kind of gave all my thoughts on that, I guess, in those first 30 minutes. So sorry if you missed that, but please do let me know if there's any other questions on your mind at all career-wise that I can answer today. And I will just pay attention to my DMs. Please do feel free to raise your hand. And okay, I see a question. What if your boss is trying not to be specific and avoids talking about promotion? So first of all, if they avoid it, it's your job to bring it up. So at least once a month, or at least once a quarter, you could definitely bring it up yourself. If they are avoiding being specific, you kind of have to probe the person, right? So they may say, I need to see that you could be a better communicator. And you're going to be like, what does that mean? Does that mean I need to present in front of like a global audience of 50 people and that you see that I could crush that presentation? Or do you need to see that I can, be a trusted advisor with clients, and what would that look like? So it needs to be a SMART goal where it's like measurable of like, I could say yes or no, you achieved this thing. So it has to be observable when you set goals. So I would just probe them and follow up around, can we set these goals together? If they're avoiding like at all setting the goals, then you could just say like, would it be okay for us to set 3 to 5 goals of what it would look like for me, in the next year to be able to advance? If they're not willing to do that, then you're probably just in the wrong place entirely. What if we just saw they will promote you, but not a timeline or specifics? Yeah, again, I would just probe and say, I'd like to what what are things looking like on your team? You could even just play dumb and say, how do promotions work? Like, what does this process look like? How did it work for you? Or how does it work typically for other people who are trying to get to this role? So using examples. If your manager still doesn't want to talk, then I would definitely leverage mentors who are more willing to be like honest and open with you. But truly, if you have a manager who is like completely unwilling, even when you probe them, then like, I just don't know if that's a supportive environment. Like, you want to feel confident that you're going to get promoted. And if they're really not willing to answer your questions, I would probably be a little concerned about that, because at the very least, even if it's a long timeline, they should be willing to mention a rough timeline, or at least, if not a timeline, to say, here's what I need to see from you to be able to get that title, or here's how it worked in the past for other people. Like, those are fair game things that they should definitely be willing to talk about. So try to build comfort, even though I can understand why a manager sometimes doesn't want to put themselves in a position where they promise something. But you could even say, like, just to give me an example, typically how long does it take for somebody, to get to that point? Or what are the key milestones or achievements or impact I need to deliver to reach that level? Or, asking other questions that still give you clues. But usually there's nuances behind the scenes with promotions. So again, if your manager is not letting you in, I would just find other mentors and other sponsors who will give you like the behind the scenes, like, here's what happens. We talk about your performance and this, that, and the other thing. The other thing you can do with promotions is just like synthesize your performance for them. So like a one pager every month of like, here are all the achievements I've done, or, and then if you do that every month for a year, you'll send those 12 one pagers. And after a year, it's like, look how much impact I drove. You get to really synthesize for someone else your impact in a very clear, easy to digest manner. So that's kind of what it means, really, to take this all into your own hands and manage up as much as humanly possible. Any other questions? Watching my DMs, but please do feel free to raise your hand and let me know how else I can help. Any career questions at all? Anything I can help with? I'll hang out for another minute. Please do feel free to raise your hand or DM me. And I can help with any and all career topics. And if not, happy to give you guys a few minutes back. Okay, I do see a question. Is it good to build relationships with the boss of the boss? Yes, absolutely. Or will he feel threatened? So I think this is a great question. I think that if you're going to meet with your manager's manager, I don't think you need to like ask, but I think you do need to just mention it to your manager. And I think you should say, like, just want you to know, I wanted to set up a meeting with whoever, whatever his name is or her name. And then you could say, I just wanted to like be able to have a career development conversation. I don't often meet with them one-on-one. So I thought it'd be good to just chat about my career and get some of their support. Just wanted to, fill you in and keep you in the loop, right? So you're letting them know. I don't think you need to ask for permission. I think you can give a very gentle heads up, and then you can go do that. And so your manager's manager might sometimes be a better source of support, and they might be sometimes more willing to be honest with you about the timeline and the promotions and the growth and what that all looks like. It just depends. Every company culture is different. Every personality is different. And so if your manager's manager is more helpful or more specific with you, great. Squeeze all the juice out of that you absolutely can. So that's a great point that I missed earlier. I do think that's a great point. So thanks for calling that out. Of course, you can have sponsors and champions and mentors across other teams and leaders of other teams who get to know you cross-functionally. But of course, your manager's manager is another great stakeholder that you should have in your corner, and you should keep them updated. So those one-pager updates that you can send, that's something you can send to not just your manager, but your manager's manager, right? So you can absolutely keep different people, in the loop on how you're doing, your progress, your career, your goals, your interests, right? And just don't ever rely on just the one person making your destiny, right? Your manager, right? There's so many other people that you can pull in to pull you up, right, to the next level, and get you involved, and just really thinking on your behalf and keeping your name in mind in other rooms, right? So don't only rely on your manager. And especially, you never know, your manager could leave the job. So you just always want to build relationships across the company for sure, right? Any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand. Would you advise to do an exit interview? Should you be detailed in it if it's a must have? Let's see. I like to do it, but that's just me. Personally, I like for people to have feedback. And I think it's important for companies to learn and grow and evolve. If they didn't serve you, what could they be doing better for other employees? So I think it's kind of our responsibility to our fellow colleagues to do it. And I think it's always worth it to do that and to be direct and to be honest. I don't think there's harm, but I do think there's ways, maybe detailed is the wrong word, but like, I think there's ways to be clear, but also polite and professional. Like, I think you can get your point across without like saying it in the same words that you would say if you were talking to a friend, right? Like, we might be really off the cuff and really direct and, just sort of say it however, but, you don't want to sugarcoat things, but I think you want to find that happy medium of how can I get my point across and still be like, give helpful feedback without maybe feeling so complainy, but rather constructive. Like, what is a process they could have had, or a tool they could have had, or something that could have, practically been done differently to influence your experience, right? So I think as long as it's like practical, ideas that you have that they could improve on, that's totally professional. And if they're doing an interview, hopefully they're willing already to hear it. So I think that's totally okay to do. Yeah. Any other questions? Anything else at all career-wise? I am an open book. Let me know. These are great questions. And if not, please do feel free to find me on LinkedIn. Check out our website. We have a ton of free resources. If there's topics you want to hear more about, let us know, because we're going to be back for more. We would be happy to kind of see what's on your mind and what we need more about, more talks about. We have a ton of free resources on our website, as I mentioned. But, if there's no other questions, please do get in touch. I'm here to support you all and your careers. I know a lot of this can be very daunting, but I am absolutely here for you. I see a question. What if the exit interview is in writing and more of a rate your boss, but your boss was toxic? If it's in writing, I think you could actually mention to them that you'd feel comfortable to meet with somebody over a phone call, and I would just ask for that personally. And even if it is a rating of your boss, usually these things just go to HR. And even if it does go to your boss, I think there's a happy medium of like, how can I be honest? Where let's put it this way. If you want to keep a good relationship with your boss and you're worried this is going to get back to them, look, if it's like rate your boss from 1 to 5 and they were toxic, I still think you could give a 3. And that, like, I would say is like pretty, I don't want to say like low, like it's constructive in a way that hopefully they see that as an area for opportunity, but you're still protecting your relationship. Like, you're not putting a 2 or a 1 per se, but I still think as much as possible, be professional with your constructive sort of advice of what it is they should be doing better and differently. And like, I'm just a big believer in trying to be honest and help them to be better. And I think it's important for HR to know when these things are going on. But again, you can always offer a phone call if you're more comfortable with that. And if you're like, I don't need to keep a relationship with this boss and they were toxic, then yeah, give them a 1 and be honest about it. Like, if it's just for HR to know about and for the sake of future employees, be as honest as you are willing to be. I think it only helps the future of everyone. Like, we need to do this. We need to look out for each other, right? So I think it's important to have that responsibility to share what can be done better and differently. And especially if you're using the word toxic, that really means something was extremely unjust or unfair or just, a not tolerable work environment. And I think it's really important to speak up about that. And I think there's a professional way to speak up about that, right? And if you're not sure what to say, you can always go to a mentor, a peer, a coach, and, run it by them too. If you wanted to even craft a draft of what you're going to send, have other people look at that so they can help you with it. Any other questions in our last minute or two? These are wonderful questions. So we will be back, as I mentioned, for more. We're going to do regular series on FishBowl. How to navigate office politics. I feel like I'm not a pro in it. Let me know if you want to expand on that and what you really mean. I mean, look, politics, if I had to define politics in my own words, it would be the behind closed doors conversations and the relationship building. So what I would say is set up one-on-ones with people on a periodic basis, whether it's your boss, whether it's other team leaders, anyone else across the organization that you think might be helpful to you in your career path. I would just set up regular one-on-ones. And the whole purpose of that is to get to know each other, ask questions, let them know about your goals, ask for tips and advice, understand what they're working on, and just literally build authentic, honest relationships with people. Those are career development mentor meetings. So having other kind of mentors across the organization, I think you can still treat it authentically. And then naturally, as you get closer with people, they will likely just fill you in on the behind the scenes, especially if those are more senior people who have more say or more pull. So just building the right relationships, I still think you can be authentic. And once you get closer to people, they're just going to want to help you. I would say diversify your relationships. Don't just rely on one person because, politics is kind of this woven web of who's in cahoots with each other, even if it's not visible and it's not always explicit to everyone else. So honestly, just building as many relationships, but I think you can still be authentic about it. You can still be yourself, but just getting to know people, let them get to know you. They're going to want to help you if they just simply get to know you. You don't have to do something icky, if that makes sense, right? All right, I'm going to wrap it up here. I hope this was helpful. I know we just transitioned from boundaries into an AMA, but just know I am here for any and all career goals. I hope this was helpful. Please do find me on LinkedIn, reach out, connect. Happy to set up a one-on-one and chat with you all further and see how I can help. And please follow us for more, and we will talk soon. Bye, everyone.